Tory preacher that's a minister that I've never heard of, never seen. It's about the worst yourself. He said, you know, I feel so sorry for you. I was expecting Fraser Lane yesterday that never came. So I was sitting drinking decaffeinated tea, which is probably smart than you have to stop. But
I know, it was speaking words in my head.
Rory had taken his middle walk and taken
Careful,
the
you know, for life it can switch it off.
and I thought I couldn't really this. And I just went to bed. That was that one saying. All the delegates been given this thing.
Yeah, so it was emailed last night and the printed copies available on the stand.
I'll maybe say that too.
Yeah.
So is George Redmond there? Do you know? I don't know. It looks like he must be through.
George, he's over there. He's over there ready to go.
Ah, right, okay.
down at
So
the
he's going to. I thought he'd be sent to the end there then.
Oh, no, he's going to come up from the floor.
Okay.
Second row at the end,
Yeah,
passes on his head.
yeah, because that Anas is going to come up
All right.
and be here for the start.
All right. So we're waiting on him. Okay, we
Yeah.
better start with him.
Yeah.
That's one of the rules, isn't it?
I know. And of course we're waiting on that because everyone's here. If they're
Colleagues, can I bring the conference to order, please? So I want to welcome you to the Scottish Labour Party's conference 2024. Please join me in welcoming Councillor George Redman, leader of the Glasgow Labour Group, to the rostrum.
Thank you very much, Conference, for a lovely warm welcome. And it's not been raining this morning in Glasgow, so that's a really positive thing. So a warm welcome to Glasgow, and it's wonderful to see so many of our friends, colleagues and comrades here in my hometown. It's especially special for me to stand here as the leader of the Glasgow Labour Group. And let me tell you, Conference, what a group they are. I don't know if you know, but yesterday was Budget Day in Glasgow, where we were asked again to cut the budget by over £107 million, after the not-so-fully funded council tax freeze, which was handed down by the SNP in Holyrood, with not enough money for our city. And I know that's the same right across the country. Our Shadow Treasurer, Jill Brown, put together an innovative budget that looked to future-proof our city by restoring our high streets, generating income and creating a Glasgow energy company which would draw on the liquid gold asset that we have in our River Clyde. But none of it was appreciated by the Nationalists, as they simply chose to look the other way towards their Green coalition partners. Let me tell you, they're the same. The Greens and the Nationalists are the same. They're not any different. And they were delivering something that will appease their Edinburgh taskmasters. Conference, I can't wait for the day to see a Labour administration in Glasgow. And let me tell you, so do the people of Glasgow and so do the communities of Glasgow. I have been part of our movement for a long time and have served Glasgow as an elected representative for the best part of 3 decades now. But this time, as leader of our group, the sense of pride that I have is even bigger than it was before. We must fight for everything in this city now. We have a toothless administration who have presided over managed decline in our city for far too long. Over £400 million worth of savings, cuts, we have had to make in this very city since 2017. £400 million. Let's think about that. And why is this conference? Because we have an SNP Green City administration who are only interested in saving the embarrassment of their Hollywood masters and of peddling the politics of division. They ask for nothing for their First Minister and get even less in return. We have a big year ahead of us at conference, and I'm delighted that 2 of my colleagues in the Council are seeking to be in the next wave of Scottish MPs. Councillor Maureen Burke and Patricia Ferguson, I wish you and all the other candidates in Glasgow and across Scotland the very best. You know you have the Labour Group support here in Glasgow, but you also have that right across the country. I know we need a fantastic representatives of our city in Westminster, shaping policy and the voices of people of Scotland. We all know that the SNP or the Tories have not done that. But conference this weekend is not really about them. It's not really about the unending failure to deliver by the SNP, the inability to launch ferries that work, or even make sure that the first rule of deleted WhatsApp clubs is to don't speak about the deleted WhatsApp club. It would almost make you want to go and hide in your camper van, if you had one. And down at Westminster, it's not really about Recession Rishi, the Stop the Boats Brigade or the Rwanda project. It's been a nice morning for Rishi when he's wakened up this morning to 2 new Labour MPs. So a big round of applause. You beat me to it. So a big welcome to the Labour family, a Labour elected family in Jen Kitchen in Wellingborough and Damien Egan in Kingswood. Fantastic result and best wishes to both of them. This weekend it's about Labour. It's about our leader Anas Sarwar. It's about our movement and it's about what we can deliver for our communities, our cities and our country. It's about our new business strategy, delivering to bring investment back into Scotland. It's about modernising the NHS to future-proof it and ensure that its founding principles are upheld. And it's about lifting more children, adults and families out of poverty, giving them opportunities for education and making work pay in a way that no other party can. So yes, conference, in a way it's everything about us and nothing to do with either the SNP or the Tories. This is about Labour. This is about Labour delivering. This is about Labour being the change that Scotland needs. A Labour government is in our sights. So let's work hard to make sure that every one of our candidates get elected to make the change that our towns, cities and country needs. Conference, welcome to Glasgow, and I hope you have a fabulous time here. Thank you.
Thank you, George, and thank you for all you and your group do for Glasgow every single day. Conference, can I ask Aileen Dinning, Chair of the Conference Arrangements Committee, to make her first report to Conference?
Good morning, Conference. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome delegates, members and visitors to our 2024 conference here in Glasgow. And like George, can I also add my congratulations to the two fantastic and stunning results that we got in Kingswood and Wellingborough last night. This being our final conference before the next general election, this is an opportunity to showcase the positive change that Labour can deliver if we work together to help elect Labour MPs across Scotland and deliver a Labour government across the UK. We have a very busy agenda where we will hear today from our leader, Anas Sarwar, and we expect this to be extremely busy. So as a result, the CAC would ask all delegates are lined up at the hall door for 1:30 p.m. If the conference hall reaches capacity, we will have 2 overflow rooms for members who will be directed there by conference stewards. If delegates are not in their seats by 1:45 p.m, then their seat may be given away, so please ensure that you're here promptly. The Conference Arrangements Committee have been able to timetable all competent motions without the need for a priorities ballot. This does mean that some debates will be extremely busy, and we would ask all delegates to keep strictly to time. So, movers of motions are permitted up to 5 minutes to speak, with seconders and all other speakers permitted up to 3 minutes. In other words, we have a 5-3-3 formation in place. Speakers will notice a traffic light system on the stage indicating when their time is coming to an end and when their time is up. And if we are losing time, then we may have to come back and revisit those times, but we'll keep you advised of what's happening. We had 3 emergency motions received prior to the deadline. The motion submitted by Caithness, Sutherland and Ross ALP was rejected as it covered an issue which arose prior to the motion's deadline and so did not constitute an emergency. The motion submitted by Greenock and Inverclyde CLP was accepted and has been tabled in tomorrow's debate on the change we need to grow our economy. And there was a motion from the GMB which CAC have accepted, but it will go to the Scottish Executive Committee first, who will discuss their position. So we will come back to you with that decision as soon as we can. We're also hosting a panel on Great British Energy before our first debate on the change we need for a fairer, greener Scotland. In the afternoon, after Anas's speech, we will hold a debate on the change we need to deliver for working people before a hearing from Ros Foyer, General Secretary of the STUC. We will also recognise the hard work of members, CLPs and trade unions in this afternoon's session with the Keir Hardie Awards. And can I just reiterate that members will have noticed this morning there is an increased security operation at the entrance and throughout conference. These security measures will be in place throughout the entirety of conference, and I would like to remind members that there is only one entrance to the secure area of conference, situated at the entrance where you will face bag searches. Bags larger than A3 size will not be permitted, so please do not attempt to bring in larger bags or suitcases. Can you also ensure that on Sunday morning, if you have checked out of your hotel, you make alternative arrangements to store your luggage? If members leave the secure zone of conference through any other exit, they will only be permitted re-entry via the single point of secure entry. And if there are issues around that, don't come up here and make a point of order. Can you come and see the Conference Arrangements Committee first, and we will then try and resolve any difficulties that have arisen. As you know, there's a wide range of fringes taking place within the SEC in the mornings, afternoons and evenings, alongside our evening reception. And we would ask all members to ensure they participate fully in the full conference programme. In particular, we would like to highlight the fringe being hosted by the Socialist Environment and Resource Association. Originally, it was to be held in the Village Hotel. It has now been changed to the Crowne Plaza. And tomorrow evening at the close of conference, apart from the welcome reception and the conference ceilidh, will also both be in the Crowne Plaza. Please ensure you have pre-registered for the conference ceilidh. If you have not, or if you have any questions, just ask a member of the Labour Party staff. Finally, can I ask all delegates to please ensure you've collected your ballot packs from the Labour Party information stand in case a card vote is called. Once again, welcome to conference, and I move CAC report number 1.
So thank you, Eileen. Can I ask if conference accepts the report? Please come up. Please. So if you introduce yourself, you have 1 minute to make your point. Thank you.
Good morning, Conference. Elaine Smith, Coatbridge and Christon, CLP Women's Officer. Can I start by thanking Eileen for her report and the CAC for the work done in preparing conference. However, one of the 4 motions from the Women's Conference, which was submitted to this conference as a priority topic from the recent Women's Conference, has been incorporated into Composite 10, Women's Rights, contained within CAC Report 1, and is scheduled for debate tomorrow afternoon. I'm concerned that significant sections of the motion from the Women's Conference are not included in the composite motion, which is a substantial change. The original motion has not been shared with everyone, but I can assure Conference that the composite does not do justice to the views of the Women's Conference. When the party agreed the rule changes a few years ago, which enabled Women's Conference to discuss policy and to prioritise what to bring here, it was based on the assumption that Scottish Party Conference wanted to hear what our women members had to say and what they judged to be most important. And we assumed that the full motions from the Women's Conference would come here for wider debate, not an edited version. So whilst I can see that this is difficult to sort out at this stage, I'm seeking an assurance that the process will be reviewed for the future so that we can actually honour the commitment to hear in full the 4 motions from Women's Conference unamended and standing alone. Thank you.
Elaine, thanks for that. We appreciate the comments that you've made. And I think it's important that we say to conference that there were extensive discussions amongst the CAC around the specific motion mentioned and the process to be followed in taking forward motions submitted by the Women's Conference. We are content that the parties involved, including the original move of the motion, have agreed a competent composite motion and believe that this will encourage positive debate within the party. But it's also important to note that the original motion that Elaine referred to there, as passed by the Women's Conference, is still owned by the Women's Committee. The commitments in that motion for the Women's Committee to take forward work on this issue still stands and has not been superseded by the composite. So I would encourage any delegates who have questions about procedure to take the opportunity to meet and discuss this with the CAC, who will be available throughout conference and afterwards. And finally, I would say this much in response to the specific comments that Elaine made. We accept that the process is not ideal and that the lack of clarity regarding the Women's Committee and conference does need address, and we are happy to bring people together to address that matter. So I hope that resolves the issue for us, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Eileen. The process isn't ideal, but you do a great job managing it. Thank you. Thank you very much. So does conference now accept the report, given those comments from Eileen? Excellent. Conference, welcome to our 2024 conference, and I'm happy to do that as conference chair and also SEC chair. Last year, as an Edinburgh councillor, I was proud that we hosted a conference in Edinburgh. It was a fantastic event, but I have a feeling that this year in Glasgow it's going to be even better. And I think George's introduction reminded us that this conference is about much more than politics. It's a chance to enjoy the culture of one of the best cities in the world, and I hope delegates are able to take advantage of that. You can get the train through to Edinburgh at Queen Street Station, and it only takes 50 minutes to get there. But I'm proud to be SEC chair, and I have to say I've been in the SEC for some time, many years, and it's never been more united than it is now under Jackie and Anas, and I think that's because we know what is at stake. And it has been a huge year for our party the past year, but I know that this year is going to be bigger. And we've already heard about those by-election results overnight. Fantastic for us, for the momentum that we are building. And if we work hard in the coming weeks, and probably months, we can hope that the country does give us that chance to serve, so we can protect workers' rights, tackle the cost of living crisis, save our NHS yet again. It seems that it's Labour's job to do that every time it returns to power, and I think get our economy back on track. It's so important. But getting Keir elected into Downing Street is going to be a huge challenge for us, and we will have to work hard. But I think every member in Scotland knows that that is really just the start, and the next day, if we manage that, the work will start to get Anas elected as our First Minister. And that's something we used to say a couple of years ago and hope it might come true. But I think now we know if we work hard, we can make it happen if we work together. So that Edinburgh conference was a fantastic event. It was the best ever conference I attended for the party in Scotland, and we left that excited. We took that energy to Rutherglen and Hamilton West, where we tested ourselves, we tested our messaging, we tested our new General Secretary and our staff, and above all, the public tested us. And we won by a landslide. And I think politics also won that day as well, because we showed that when a Labour candidate stands saying they're going to be a hard-working local MP that will put them first, we showed that when people vote for that, that is exactly what we get. And Michael Shanks is a fantastic MP for us. So well done to him. Another high point for me has been working on the selection of our candidates for the general election. Truly humbling to meet all the candidates that came forward. People really well connected to their communities, and standing because they want to improve their community and the country as a whole. And the candidates I've met, I know that if Keir is elected into Downing Street, they won't just be backbenchers, some of them. We will actually be part of that government to deliver that progressive agenda. So it's been an amazing year, which has filled me with hope. And I think we're also showing the country that they can hope again for a better future and for that change which Labour will bring. But conference has also been a heartbreaking year for us, and by that I'm making reference to what's happening in the Middle East. And we've seen here in Scotland people take advantage of this to direct hate at our Muslim and Jewish communities, which are such an important part of our country. Absolutely sickening to see some of that. And we stand by those communities here in this party. But let's not forget that this is a conflict that started with the loss of innocent lives, and it continues with that today. And I'm proud that on the agenda tomorrow we will debate the conflict and we will make our voice heard. Because I know many people in the party, including this room, have visited that region and have spoken to people both in Israel and in Palestine who are committed to peace. And I know that it's those people, those ordinary people, that people in this room stand in solidarity with. So it's within that context of us being an internationalist party, that the conference charity this year is Medical Aid for Palestine. And I just want to share. It's fantastic to hear that applause, and let's hope that's backed up with some donations, of course. So I just want to share this short video from MAP with you. Thank you.
I'm Melanie Ward, Chief Executive of Medical Aid for Palestinians. I'm here in Egypt, where for the last few days I've been debriefing with our first emergency medical team. Doctors who were working with our team in Gaza were supporting one of the hospitals there. They report the most horrific of injuries, particularly amongst children. They've now handed over to our second emergency medical team, who are in Gaza as I speak, working in a hospital there to provide support to the doctors and to save as many lives as they can. You can see behind me that I'm at one of our warehouses where we are packing up our next shipment of medical supplies to go to Gaza, which is only possible with your support. The shipment includes life-saving supplies such as bandages, gauze, antiseptic, painkillers, IV fluid for drips, and also crucially it contains items to treat cancer, to treat kidney dialysis, without which people in Gaza are needlessly dying. Although we are almost 100 days into this war, we're only at the beginning of what is going to be a years-long humanitarian response and the biggest in MAP's history. Our amazing team of staff on the ground in Gaza stand ready as soon as they can to build up our programmes, to provide support to malnourished children, to receive more doctors who will be providing support there. And MAP has got so much more to do to save lives in this crisis. Thank you for everything that you have done to support us. Please continue to donate. Thank you.
Colleagues, please welcome John Paul McHugh, General Secretary of the Scottish Labour Party, to address the conference.
Conference, may I start by adding my welcome to Glasgow. It's brilliant to see such a busy room, a packed agenda for the weekend, and dozens of supporters and sponsors for our conference. But I have to start with a big thank you. I thank you for all the support you have given me in the last 10 months, and to James Kelly, our former General Secretary, for his dedication and hard work over many years. Conference, Scottish Labour is changing, and that was never more evident than on the streets of Rutherglen last year. Over many months, Scottish Labour showed a renewed determination and organisational effectiveness that mirrored their political leadership and ambition for success. And it was easily defined by one thing, the result: a swing of 20.4% the best in Scottish history. For me, the greatest moment wasn't the result or the after-party, as good as it was. It was the endless weekends of campaigning, not because hundreds came through the door or the number of contacts they delivered every week. It was how they left. Enthused, energised, believing we can win, and desperate to hold on to that winning feeling. Thank you to every single one of you. Together, we made history. I want this weekend to be about how we continue in that path and deliver the change Scotland needs. Building a stronger Scottish Labour Party membership must be at its core. When we are united, it is incredible what we can achieve. But conference, we have a huge mountain to climb. Take a minute and think back to 2015. Remember the devastation of Labour losing that election and Scottish Labour only retaining a single Member of Parliament. So when we look at the polls, it's natural to be encouraged because under Anas and Keir, our party has transformed itself for the better, but no one has cast a vote. We cannot take anything for granted. Conference, the only poll we need to be focused on is polling day. We have thousands of voters to speak to persuade them of our vision for the country and Scotland, regardless of when Rishi Sunak builds up the courage to call it. Families across Scotland need a Labour government led by Keir, with a strong Scottish Labour Party led by Anas. This weekend is an opportunity to focus our minds on that challenge, to continue our work with our UK colleagues and draw on each other's skills at every opportunity. Be a key part in the machinery at the heart of the Labour campaign, a campaign that is operating at a level none of us have ever seen, and our opponents know that only too well. But only this week we have seen the Tories announce that they will be building an election war chest like never before. And I am sure we'll see the SNP's election campaign again trigger into life. This is not going to be easy, but Scottish Labour will be GE ready. Voters are seeing a different Labour Party, a party that has changed politically, operationally, financially and strategically. But our campaign will always be measured by what we do on the ground. And the more we do together, the stronger that campaign will be. Now, conference, before I finish, let's set one thing straight. Very often I hear this branch office reference. Let me share my view. In the last year, Bellshill, Labour gain. East Kilbride, Labour gain. Rutherglen, Labour gain. Motherwell, Labour gain. Our Scottish Gala dinner, the largest ever. And you only need to look at this conference this weekend. Branch office, not then, not now, and not ever. Conference, Scottish Labour is walking tall, and it's down to all of you in this room and all of our members outside of it. To our affiliated trade unions, working with us day in and day out to deliver for working people and give them the change they desperately need. It is down to the talented group of people I have the privilege to work with every day. Conference, I am proud to be part of Team Anas and Jackie, but ultimately I am proud to be a very small part of what is Team Scottish Labour. So I say, bring on the general election.
So thank you, John Paul, and thank you for all you and your team do for us. Conference, please join me in welcoming Ed Miliband MP, Shadow Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Sarah Boyack MSP, Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero, Energy and Just Transition, Mark Wilde, Managing Director of SGN, Lindsay Southworth, Head of Communications for EDF Renewables, and Sam Peacock, Managing Director of Strategy, Regulation and Corporate Affairs for SSE. Our panel on GB Energy.
Hi there. I'm absolutely delighted to be chairing this panel, kicking off what is going to be a really exciting conference. In April last year, Anas asked me to be our Scottish Labour Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero, Energy and Just Transition. And many people said I was pleased to be back, but when I was first in Parliament and I introduced our renewables targets, at that time they were seen as radical. Now, the pace of change and innovation has increased rapidly, but we've got a climate crisis. It's a reality, not a future problem. And there's so much more we need to do to deliver just transition and jobs for people. And energy is going to be one of the major issues at the next election. People's energy bills have rocketed. Too many people are going cold over winter. And we've got two governments that are failing to make the most of our economic opportunities and deliver on the green economy. So it's only Labour that's got our ambitious offer that will reduce bills and make our homes warmer. And it's on making our homes warmer I want to start, because this is pretty shocking, but over a third of Scottish households are living in fuel poverty. And the cost of living crisis has made people worried about the cost of heating, with many of them being forced to sit in the cold without turning their heating on. And we in Scotland have some of the most poorly insulated and damp homes in Europe. It's bad for people's health, it's bad for the well-being, and it's bad for our climate. So we need to see a plan to support people and provide the warmer homes that they need. And our local authorities, who are well placed to work with us on this issue, have seen their budgets cut by the SNP Green government, but they're absolutely key to helping local communities on the ground. So I'm going to be working with my Labour Council colleagues in Scotland to discuss what more we can do to tackle fuel poverty, to work with the Scottish Cooperative Party, to develop more council-owned, more community-owned and more cooperatively owned heat and energy projects that also tackle energy efficiency. And that's going to create local jobs, it's going to bring down people's bills, and it will deliver investment right across the country. Because we've got to have an approach that's going to work. The homes in the Highlands are not the homes that are in Glasgow, so we need the right solutions. And we need to empower our local authorities, give them local solutions, make our homes more affordable to heat. So we need training schemes in place across the country to make sure we get the skilled workforce that can deliver in our communities to make the difference people need, and making our homes warmer and reducing their energy bills. It's a win-win. That is the change that Scotland needs. So it's exciting to be here today as our first session in conference. I want to start our Greener, Fairer Scotland panel. Let me just introduce them. We've got Ed Miliband, Shadow Secretary of State for Energy, Security and Net Zero. Mark Wilde, who is the Managing Director of Scottish Gas Networks. Lindsay Southworth, Head of Communications for EDF Renewables, covering the UK and Ireland. And Sam Peacock, who is the Managing Director of Strategy, Regulation and Corporate Affairs at Scottish and Southern Energy. So we're going to be doing some Q&A, but first, delighted to hand over Ed to do some opening remarks. Over to you, Ed.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sarah, look, can I first of all say just how fantastic it is to be at Scottish Conference, and it is great to see Scottish Labour back with my good friend, your brilliant leader, our brilliant leader, Anas Sarwar. Let's hear it for Anas, everyone. And also, I think it's fair to say after last night's by-election results, UK Labour is also back under our leader, Keir Starmer, who is doing a fantastic job. Now, look, friends, I think what we all know, going around Scotland, going around the rest of the United Kingdom, is people want change. People want change. People are desperate for change in our country. And I see it as my job not just to deliver on climate change, but to deliver on the economic change that this country needs. And it's true in my constituency in Doncaster, it's true in Scotland, it's true across the United Kingdom. And I just want to briefly tell you what it is that our offer is going to be at the general election so we can go out and tell people. First of all, we're going to have GB Energy, a publicly owned energy company headquartered here in Scotland, investing billions of pounds in floating wind, in the new technologies. And you know, I think I'm old enough to remember when the SNP made this promise. 7 years ago, they promised a publicly owned energy company. They have failed to deliver. We will deliver, friends, on that promise. And get this, get the dividing line here with the Tories, because the Tories will say, we don't want public ownership of our energy system. But we have public ownership of our energy system, just foreign public ownership of our energy system. 45% of our offshore wind is owned by foreign governments. And I say, friends, if it is good enough for Norway, if it's good enough for Denmark, if it's good enough for France, if it's good enough for Sweden, it's good enough for Scotland, and it's good enough for the United Kingdom. And friends, that is just the start. We're going to have a national wealth fund that is going to invest in carbon capture in Scotland, in steel, in electric battery factories, in our ports, in hydrogen. We're going to have a British jobs bonus. And what's that British jobs bonus about? It's about saying to companies, if you locate and manufacture in Britain, we will give you a clear incentive to do so. And why are we saying that? Because we want to end the grotesque situation where we have massive offshore wind farms off the coast of Scotland, but not a piece of them is built here in Scotland. Friends, we are going to change that. And that isn't all. A billions of pounds local power plan to partner with communities across Scotland so that people in communities see the benefit of that renewable power flowing to their local communities, tackling fuel poverty, and as Sarah has said, a warm homes plan to slash fuel poverty, because we know we need to insulate homes across Scotland and across the United Kingdom. And what does all of this add up to? It adds up to Scotland being the clean energy capital of the United Kingdom, and it adds something else, which is a just transition across Scotland, especially for our oil and gas communities, because we will create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the industries that can power our future. Hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, floating offshore wind. These are the technologies. And for the first time, we are going to succeed where the SNP and the Tories have failed. We will deliver. So let's go out, friends, on the doorstep with that offer, showing to people the difference that we are going to make. I think we can achieve great things together. A UK Labour government in Westminster and a Scottish Labour government led by Anas Sarwar. Thank you very much, friends.
Now, I'm conscious we're running a little bit behind time here and that our panel theoretically would be finishing in about a minute. But I want to make sure that all our panellists get to introduce themselves and ask a couple of questions. So I'm going to kick off first with Mark. Do you want to kick off?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Wilde. I'm the CEO of Scotia Gas Networks. I run the gas network in Scotland and Southern England and actually half of Northern Ireland as well. I would say, and I disagree with everything Ed said actually, the energy transition in the next 30, 40 years will be the biggest single thing that will happen in our lifetimes. For me, I see it as a great opportunity, particularly an opportunity for Scotland. You know, Scotland has three natural advantages. It has geological advantages with lots of wind. It also has a country south of here in England that is desperate for the power to be exported. And crucially, it has, of course, a world-class workforce. You know, the best oil and gas engineers in the world are generally Scottish. Now, that's not me just talking to a home crowd. It's true. You know, everywhere you go in the world, you'll find a Scottish oil and gas engineer. I think in that opportunity, though, we have to think very carefully about, as Ed said, a just transition. You know, I grew up I was a son of a coal miner in the Durham coalfield, and in the 1980s there was an unjust transition under the Thatcher government, and I'm very heartened to hear the Labour Party preparing for government talking about an industrial strategy, and it will literally take all of us. It'll take all the plumbers, electricians, welders, and it'll take capital. You know, my shareholders are Brookfield, BlackRock, and Ontario Teachers, a $2 trillion organisation that wants to bring capital here. So I think the crucial thing is certainty of message. My question, though, I do have a question. And what gets forgotten about a lot is industrial commercial customers. There are 50 distilleries connected to our network, and not all of them are in industrial clusters. So I just wonder, views on hydrogen and GB energy for industrial customers and generation. I guess, Ed, you would see that as absolutely crucial in decarbonising the grid by 2030. What do you think of hydrogen for industrial?
What my initial plan to do was to go around, get all 3 questions, and then get us to come in.
Sure.
Are you okay with that? Because we could be tempted to speak for about 10 minutes on each question, I suspect. So next up, I was going to let Lindsay ask a question.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Southworth and I work for EDF Renewables, which is Electricity de France, but we are also Scottish. We have 250 people here in Scotland. I'm based in Edinburgh, and we also provide a fifth of the UK's low carbon energy with our other sister companies in the UK, which is of course mainly the nuclear business. We are growing rapidly. When I joined the company 10 years ago, we had about 100 people. We've now got 600. We have got massive growth plans, and we have 10 onshore wind farms in Scotland. We're building a big offshore wind farm in the Firth of Forth, and we've got 44 sites in total, and by the end of the year we will have 50. So that gives you an idea of the investment we're making in the UK and in Scotland. And I think there are a few things that are holding us back. One of the things is the grid. We cannot do a proper transition without the transmission that we need. And there's a lot of work that needs to go into the grid across the UK and a lot in Scotland as well. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on as well is the skills point. We do a lot as a company. We have a fantastic apprenticeship programme, a fantastic graduate scheme, but we really need to work with government to make sure that children in primary school should be knowing what jobs they should start thinking about. And in renewables, it's not just technical jobs. We are desperate for electrical engineers, but it's jobs like mine, it's jobs like accountants, it's jobs like lawyers. Those are the kind of people that we need. And I guess I'll come to my question now. Another thing that holds us back sometimes from progress is planning. And I know, Sarah, this is right up your street. But I think in terms of planning, we find that we get blockages along the way. We have had NPF4 in Scotland, which is great. They're talking about 12 months to get planning through, but we're not really sure what that looks like. And I guess the other problem that we've got is we don't have planners, and that's connected to the skills problem. We don't have planners in local authorities who can help us make the transition to net zero. And also when we do have planners, they don't have the skills to look at a solar farm, which is a relatively new technology, or maybe hydrogen. So we need to have that in the system to make the progress we need to make.
Yep, and Sam, you were my next questioner.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. So I work for SSE, Scotland's largest company, and we're investing, or hope to invest, 20 billion in Scotland over the decade ahead. Now, our origins, as I think Ed and certainly Sarah know, date back to actually a Labour Secretary of State for Scotland. Tom Johnson, he laid the Hydroelectric Scotland Act that led to sort of socio-economic transformation that people know, part of the Highlands, which has been really, really important. And I think a century later, there are some parallels with where we are. Huge challenge of climate change, but huge economic opportunity for Scotland. As we've said, we've got all the wind and rain in the world. We've got a brilliantly skilled sort of employee base. So all the ingredients are there. So the 3 things I'd ask for very quickly, because I know we're short on time, are 1, Sarah and Ed, if you can help us get a planning system that works quickly. 2, there's a lot of talk in London around market reforms and spatial plans. We need to make sure that they enable Scottish investment to happen. And 3, if you can work with us in delivering some of the ports and manufacturing. We talked in your bit, Ed, and I completely agree, manufacturing is a bit where we struggle in offshore wind. So my question to the panel is how you'll harness your inner Tom Johnson and unleash the economic potential to Scotland, particularly through renewables. Thank you.
Well, great questions. If we had an hour, we could do really proper answers, but I think just kicking off, there's something about having government leadership, which we have not had from either government. We've got one government who's turning away from the issue, and the other government in Scotland is just not doing the heavy lifting. So I think on things like planning, there's something about resourcing our local authorities, making sure we have that pipe stream of planners coming into the sector who are skilled, who are experienced, working with COSLA so that we can make sure that they get the knowledge about the new renewables tech which is developing all the time so that we get those decisions on the ground that are appropriate for the local communities where they can work with business as well. So that pipe stream of planners is crucial. And I think it links into the apprenticeships issue. You've got a Scottish Government that's cut back funding to colleges and unis by about 44 million just this year. So we need to work with those companies and trade unions to identify skills opportunities, apprenticeships in our communities, but also the research and development that goes with that. For me, that's essential. And then the last thing just to talk about, just that thought about making faster decisions. When we launched our Green Prosperity Plan in Leith, we were at this company who installed turbines on the seabed, and they said if they go to Canada, it takes them 2 years. In Scotland, it's 7 years. So we need to speed up that process because companies are going to go abroad with our technology if we don't get our act together. So for me, that's both changing the Scottish Government, but it's also getting Ed in there as energy leader with GB Energy. So that would be my top line answers. Ed, what would you say?
I mean, thank you for the questions, and they're sort of really important. Look, the first thing I'd say is, if we are elected as the next government of the UK, we will have something that this government certainly doesn't have, which is one of our 5 central missions will be clean power by 2030. That's a zero carbon electricity system by 2030. So we will have the authority of the Prime Minister driving it forward. But there's another aspect to this, which is, look, the Tories don't really believe in the power of government. They still think you can leave this energy transition to the market. And so, every day they kind of see it as their job to prove that government is ineffective. And they're doing a very good job of it, let's be honest, with each other. You need a government that is properly engaged. I was at dinner with some of the renewables folks last night, and they told me stories that would make you tear your hair out about some of the barriers in their way, and the fact that there's no one is lifting a finger in Whitehall or in the SNP government or in the Scottish government to actually break down these barriers. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I just want to make a point about the partnership, which is incredibly important. I see business and crucially the trade unions as at the centre of this partnership. And I just want to sort of make this point because it's true around skills, it's true around all of the objectives we have. If we are elected as a government, we're going to have a very different attitude about the role of trade unions in this clean energy future. For me, trade unions are absolutely at the core of this future. That's the case in Denmark. That's the case in the rest of Europe. It needs to be the case in the United Kingdom as well. And that will help us. It won't hinder us, as the Tories suggest. It will help us guarantee proper standards in relation to the renewable sector, and it will help us tackle these challenges that we face. Third point, I want to come back on hydrogen. Hydrogen is incredibly important to our future, particularly for these industrial uses, also as a potential source of long-term storage as well. And again, the hydrogen problem is a bit of a parable for the rest of the problems the government has. They don't, it seems to me, I wouldn't expect you to comment on this, Mark, they don't have a proper vision for the role that hydrogen is going to play. They're not driving it forward at sufficient speed. They don't have a sense of you need certainty on the demand side and the supply side, it seems to me. And this is where the National Wealth Fund and GB Energy can definitely play a role. So we've said we're going to invest extra money in some of the clusters around CCS through the National Wealth Fund. We've said we're going to invest £500 million in terms of an electrolyser factory factories for hydrogen through GB Energy. I'm sure there's more that GB Energy can do. And I think this is the partnership we need. And the last point I'd make is this. The scale of the challenge we face is so big that we're going to need all of the technologies at our disposal, and hydrogen is definitely part of the story.
Okay, I'm told we've just got time for a quick follow-up question from each of our panellists. So, Lindsay, you go first.
Yeah, so I was going to ask about Labour investing in the green economy. So we've seen recently about quite a lot of media coverage around policies and things like that. And I think what business does need is certainty. So it's really just to ask you what your plans actually look like to invest in the green economy.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, my question is, we talk a lot about renewables, but obviously we need backup for when the wind isn't blowing. We've had now 3 goes at trying to do carbon capture and storage at Peterhead. Hopefully we'll be able to do that at some point soon. What's in your head as the kind of backup technologies that you'd like to be operating around renewables?
Okay, and Mark.
Not a question, and save you some time, but I just wanted to underline what Ed said about the relationship with the unions, which I think is the game changer. We've done so much work with Gary Smith and the GMB, and the key is to bring the unions and the private sector financing together in the spirit of long-term jobs and skills. So not a question, just to say I really agree. That is the coalition that will get it done.
I mean, so excellent points and questions. Just on the point about where the investment is going to go. So we've said that we'll make a big investment of 8 billion in GB Energy. That's partly about the local power plan across communities, because I think it's really important that communities see the benefits of renewables sort of directly for them. But it's also about these new technologies. You know, if we're going to lead in industrial policy, we've got to advance in these technologies like floating wind. And the truth is that floating wind, and this is a conversation that Gary Smith and I have had a lot, floating wind has been quite stalled. It's an obvious area where GB Energy could make a difference and where Scotland could absolutely be in the lead. On the, and that's just one example, the National Wealth Fund alongside it and the other things I talked about. On the point about backup, you're completely right about this. I think there's different possibilities in relation to backup. There's hydrogen, there's gas with CCS, which is potentially crucial. There's battery storage. I think you're going to need all of them and others as well. Pump storage, you know, it's this point I made that the scale of what we need is such that to rule out any technologies, you know, would not be the right thing to do.
And we've got over 20 years' experience in Scotland of some of those industries developing. We've got research and technology at our universities. We've got people with skills. We've got folk who've worked in the sector. So we've got a massive opportunity in Scotland. But from my perspective, as our spokesperson, you need government leadership. You need partnership with the business sector, with trade unions, and involving our communities. And if we do that, it's a win-win, because we get the new technologies, we get the developments out in the country, we create the jobs, and we reduce our emissions. I mean, we tick every box, but you need organisation and leadership. And for me, that's what we've not got. So that's why I was so pleased that Ed was up for coming to conference, because this is a UK and a Scottish issue, and we need to work together. And I think for us, in terms of our campaigning, bringing people's bills down. I got lobbied by a local charity recently who were talking about people who have a health issue where they have to have their electricity turned all the time on, and they're worried about that because of their bills. That should not be a country like ours. We need a fairer country, we need a greener country, and we need a country with the jobs that are there now for people. So keep going, Ed.
Thank you.
Let us all go and campaign and get that green prosperity plan, local power plan, and green homes plan in place, because our constituents need it now, not next year. Thanks, everyone.
Just 1 minute more. I was waiting in the wings and I heard your General Secretary's excellent speech, and I was sort of thought he's reminding me about 2015. But I don't take it personally. I'm a good person to endorse his message, which is the opinion polls are good. Anas has done an amazing job to turn things around in Scotland. Keir has done an amazing thing to turn things around across the United Kingdom. But nobody has voted in the general election yet. And, you know, we've got a massive agenda here. We've got an agenda to change Scotland, to change the United Kingdom, but it's up to us to go out and sell it. And that's why I'm so grateful for your support and for everything that you are doing, because, you know, this is an election we've got to win for the future of Scotland and the future of the United Kingdom. I think we can win that election. Don't believe the opinion polls. Let's go out and win the election. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks to the panel, thanks to Ed, and enjoy the debate. Cheers. Okay.
Okay, so that was really interesting, actually, and I think the points made about reforming the planning process are well made. Conference, we will now watch our clean energy mission video.
Maximising a jobs-first transition must be more than just a slogan. For two failing governments, it has to be enshrined as part of our national mission. And that's why the next Labour government will deliver a real green jobs revolution. Because we have 4 clear objectives. We will deliver lower bills, not higher bills. We will deliver more jobs, not fewer jobs. We will deliver greater energy security so we don't have to rely on imports from despotic regimes like Russia. And we will deliver global climate leadership. Because, friends, there is going to be a global leader in the green revolution. Why can't that be us? Why can't that global leader be Scotland? Why can't that global leader be the UK? It can be, and it will be, with a UK Labour government led by Keir Starmer.
Fantastic. So we're about to enter our first debate session, a few minutes late, but we will finish this on time. So I'd appreciate if speakers could be ready to leap onto the stage as quickly as possible. So our open to debate will be on the change we need for a fairer, greener Scotland. Before we begin, can I take this opportunity to thank our CLPs, trade unions and affiliated organisations for the number of motions received. Copies of all the motions to be debated at conference have been emailed in advance to delegates, and they can also be found in the CAC report. Can I also remind delegates to ensure they have picked up their ballot packs from the party's information stand in Hall 1, just outside in the exhibition area. During this morning's debates, conference will consider the following motions. Composite Motion 1 on Just Transition, submitted by Unite and CERA. Composite Motion 2 on Labour's Clean Energy Mission, submitted by the Scottish Cooperative Party and Glasgow's Southside CLP. Motion 1 on Energy Price, submitted by Ettrick, Roxburgh and Berwickshire CLP. Motion 2 on Home Heating, submitted by GMB Scotland. And Motion 3 on ScotWind, submitted by Moray CLP. I will call each motion one after the other during the debate and invite speakers once all motions have been moved and seconded. So please try to move through that phase quite quickly. Speakers are welcome to speak on any of the motions moved in the debate in this session. Each delegate moving a motion has 5 minutes to speak. A seconder has 3 minutes and will accept a formal second from the floor in the interest of time where possible. All delegates speaking in the debate have 3 minutes. This will be timed, and we've got magic buttons here to stop people from over-talking, and I will be strict to allow as many delegates as possible to participate. I think this is quite important. Can I ask the delegates who are moving and seconding composite motion 1, 2 and motion 1 to be prepared to come forward? If the delegate moving composite motion 1 can come to the rostrum right now, and the other delegates moving and seconding this session can then make themselves known to the stewards, and this will maximise the time available to make the contributions. So Delegate 1, moving composite 1, I hope. Yes, things are going so far so good. Come over to you.
Chair, comrades, Heather Gilfillan, Unite the Union, moving composite 1 on Just Transition. Conference, every day we have commentators speaking about our need to transition and decarbonise our society. But the voices we don't often hear are those of the workers. Our members in Unite, from oil and gas to energy and construction, understand the need to decarbonise and transition, but they're frankly fed up of barroom debaters or other so-called experts who have little or no experience of the day-to-day reality in these or other industries. And they are appalled at the lack of industrial planning and rightly concerned that decisions and announcements on issues such as licences for oil and gas exploration and extraction are being taken in the absence of any real, tangible, just transition measures, with no real regard for job security of the workers affected. Workers whose skills will be required if we are to transition to a green economy and whose jobs, pay and terms and conditions must be protected. Even simple measures such as the proposed training passport to make it easier for oil and gas workers to apply their transferable skills continue to be delayed. In the area of renewables, Alex Salmond's prediction of the wind power making Scotland the Saudi Arabia of the North has failed to materialise. We only have a fraction of the tens of thousands of jobs in renewables that we were promised. We have seen the closure of CS Wind and the need to campaign to save BIFAB, and too many of the jobs that have been created in the renewables or in the wider economy are low-skilled, low-paid and insecure. Let me be absolutely clear, Conference. The standard example of a green job should not be a delivery driver with an electric bike. The immediate concern of our members is their future at work and how they support themselves and their family. They need and we demand income security through good, well-paid jobs with opportunities to learn on the job. Upskilling focused on training and education required to work with materials and technologies. It's not just the workers involved who need and would benefit from that. In construction, for example, there is an urgent need to upskill workers to fit, maintain and retrofit heating systems to tackle fuel poverty as well as improve the environment. Conference, a proper, organised, just transition requires commitment, planning and radical measures, including an extension of public ownership and control. At the very least, it requires intervention to save jobs. We have, if we are to transition them, the jobs of the future. Instead, we see jobs lost and more threatened. Just look at the situation in Grangemouth, a centre of Scotland's energy and a critical significance to our economy. The need for a serious plan and intervention to ensure a future for the workers and the site is evidence. Across the economy, we need an industrial strategy based on dialogue with the workers and their unions at its core. We cannot allow a revisiting of 80s-style industrial change. Labour has a responsibility to protect those it seeks to serve, not to secure millionaire banker bonuses in the city. Our mission should always be to improve the lives of workers and their families, ensuring positive job prospects for children in our local areas, lifting millions of kids from the real threat of poverty. So we say no to boom and bust, no to market-driven financial control of our society, and no to economic and social vandalism and the destruction of communities. For us, a truly just transition has to be planned and coordinated, involving a range of steps and measures, new low-carbon technologies, carbon capture, hydrogen, and investment by local authorities, building council housing, creating jobs and apprenticeships. It needs to protect jobs, pay conditions, and improve skills. It needs to be worker-led. This must be a Labour's mission, which must embedding the extending collective bargaining, union recognition, the restoration of trade union freedoms, a focus on job security. I move.
Okay, fantastic. That was only 2 seconds over, so well done, well done. So do we have a seconder for this motion? Thank you.
That's me. Yeah, I'm Matthew Crichton, Sarah Scotland. That's Labour's Environment Campaign. Just to finish off on the Fringe meeting, which Eileen gave a plug for earlier, tomorrow after the conference, Climate and Transport Policies with Unison and Unite in the Crowne Plaza. So, I'm bringing you a positive message about climate, just transition, Labour policies in the general election. But on climate change, it does feel tough, doesn't it? We see rising temperatures, failing governments, and frightening news that climate tipping points are coming closer than we thought. I'll skip the scary bit because I think we all understand how serious the threat of climate change is, not across the world and in Scotland. So it's not surprising that another thing that's rising is climate anxiety, especially for young people. But who here hasn't got anxieties about climate and what we're doing around the world? So it's a big issue in politics at last, an issue on which other parties are failing in government. This is a political territory that is full of opportunities for Labour. So what makes Labour different? How do we convert anxiety to hope and to votes for Labour? Firstly, we're determined to fix climate and the economy together, covering the cost of living and energy prices. Keir Starmer told us that last year, and I bet he'll tell us it this year. Secondly, we work with trade unions to create a just transition which protects workers and builds a better Scotland. It's not going to be business as usual without the carbon, which anyway isn't really an option. Thirdly, we're socialists, and unlike the Tories, we know that to ramp up the investment we need, we, the public, have to drive it. That means significant levels of public spending and also public energy. GB Energy is a great start, but only a start. And it's not only in energy. Every sector should have a just transition plan. For example, in housing, in transport, in local government. In each of these, as we decarbonise, we can improve public services and tackle inequalities. And to fulfil this mission, which we have embraced, we need the plans, we've heard about them, and we need the money. How much? Now, there is a figure in the motion which was submitted only a few weeks ago, which we were kind of quite attached to. But the alternative approach now is to make the plans and then put a cost on them. A recent and authoritative report by Lord Stern at the LSE says public investment in this should be about 1% of GDP. And we have to recognise that if we don't have the plans to raise that money for the creation of the new infrastructure and the good new jobs, then workers will have reasons to be sceptical about this talk of just transition. So how much is that? Well, there's a bunch of crazy radicals who say they want 50 billion a year. That's the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry. That report, 1% of GDP, how much is that? 26 billion a year, and I'll settle for that. So as I wind up, we'll go back to Scotland. In Scotland, what does this mean? It means preparing for the new opportunities which will come with a Labour government in Westminster. It means getting ready to deliver through industrial growth, through municipal enterprise, land reform, just one more sentence, and getting ready for an election in which our opponents are failing on this agenda. We have a chance to create a tipping point in politics. Let's do that. Thank you very much, comrades.
So do we have a mover for composite motion 2?
Adam Wilson, Scottish Cooperative Party, pleased to be moving composite motion 2 on Labour's clean energy mission. Conference, our country is facing a multitude of crises. The climate, nature, energy and cost of living crisis are all interlinked. While the Tories sleptwalked into an energy crisis, leaving working people paying the price, the SNP and the Greens have spent years developing and publishing strategies, but delivering little. The Committee on Climate Change has warned that the UK risks missing out on the opportunities of the green economy in the face of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and the EU's Green Deal industrial plan. This would mean losing our competitive advantage forever. The committee has also warned that under the SNP and the Greens, Scotland is at significant risk of failing to achieve our climate targets this decade, with those targets now becoming meaningless. Conference, Scotland is being failed by 2 bad governments. This motion sets out how Labour will deliver the change that Scotland needs, to deliver green energy, to increase jobs and cut bills for households and businesses. As part of Labour's climate mission, we will establish a publicly owned energy company, headquartered in Scotland, GB Energy, working to develop and invest in homegrown clean energy, from wind and solar to nuclear, which has played a role in our energy mix for generations and will utilise the skills of workers and communities at Chapel Cross, Hunterston and Torness. We will implement a British jobs bonus, creating jobs in the energy sector, in the supply chains, and creating the plumbers, electricians, engineers and technicians we need to power our green future. And a local power plan, building local and community projects across Scotland and the UK. Conference, it will come as no surprise that the Cooperative Party has lots of ideas for our local power plan. Across Scotland, there are growing examples of locally owned energy generation projects delivering clean powers and heat in their areas. And those areas, in return, are enjoying the benefits of ownership, because ownership matters. In 2023, the Edinburgh Solar Cooperative generated over 1 gigawatt of clean solar power. The council receives cheaper electricity, and the city has seen money distributed to local groups to improve health and well-being, our environment, and spread the benefits of renewable energy even further. Proposals from the Scottish Cooperative Party will help us further these aims by doubling the Community and Renewable Energy Fund. The CARES Fund has helped finance energy projects across Scotland, particularly during the development phase. Doubling the fund will ensure that community energy projects have the financing they need to get off the ground. Placing quotas on public sector energy procurement might be a minute detail, but would have the potential to turn public sector bodies into a vital customer for community energy projects across Scotland, in turn providing financial certainty, helping those communities leverage in even more development funding. And taking an area-based approach to retrofitting, ensuring that local stakeholders who know their housing stock best are resourced to get homes in their areas energy efficient. These are just some of the ideas that the Cooperative Party has and wants to see implemented under our next UK Labour government to expand the size of the community and cooperative-owned energy sector. Conference, in the face of multiple crises, Scotland needs change. Please back this motion to deliver jobs, to deliver lower bills, to deliver warm homes and to spread the benefits of community-owned energy generation to all parts of Scotland. That's a fairer, greener Scotland we need. Conference, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have someone to second? Oh, we do.
Susan King, Glasgow Southside CLP, seconding composite motion on Labour's clean energy mission. Last year, for the first time in history, global warming exceeded 1.5 degrees across an entire 12 months. Our planet is in the grip of a climate emergency, and this emergency requires urgent action. Scotland is ideally placed to help meet the UK's net zero ambitions with access to rich sources of renewable energy. But both the SNP and Tory governments are failing to show leadership at this pivotal moment. With the Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, Scotland can be a leader in clean power. We can reduce energy bills for households and businesses, and we can make homes warmer. GB Energy, a new publicly owned clean energy company, will be headquartered in Scotland. Of course, Conference, public ownership of energy isn't a new thing. The German, French and Chinese governments currently own part of our energy network. Under a Labour government, that will change. GB Energy will invest in clean, homegrown energy, delivering energy security here at home, including offshore wind, onshore wind, green hydrogen, and recognising the critical role of nuclear power. Conference, Labour's Green Prosperity Plan and establishing GB Energy won't just bring down bills, it will also deliver jobs. Over 50,000 jobs in Scotland alone. The British Jobs Bonus will support jobs in the energy supply chains, and incentives to developers will help bring new jobs into our proud industrial heartlands, including the north east of Scotland. Our current proposals should be the floor of our ambition. This motion calls on Scottish Labour to continue to campaign for and develop proposals that deliver more Scottish jobs in green energy, increased innovation in future energy sources, and achieve a true just transition in Scotland. I am proud our party is committed to a clean energy system by 2030, and I am proud that under a Labour government, Scotland will play a leading role in tackling the climate emergency. Conference, please support this motion.
Thank you, Susan. And now we have the delegate moving motion 1.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, my name is David Smith. I represent Ettrick, Roxburgh and Berwickshire CLP in the beautiful Scottish borders. It's my first time speaking, so please forgive me if I make any mistakes. Thank you. Conference, bills are spiralling because of 14 years of failed Tory energy policy and 17 years of SNP energy inaction that has left us overly reliant on fossil fuels. While the SNP and Tories are distracted by their own internal problems, only Labour has a plan to help people through the cost of living crisis. Working people across Scotland are paying the price for the failed SNP and Tory policies with sky-high fuel and food bills. Scotland is being held back by the SNP and the Tories, who have built a low-growth, low-wage economy, meaning fewer jobs, less money in people's pockets and weaker public finances. The SNP government have offered almost nothing new to help people manage the cost of living crisis. Only Labour has a serious plan to make Britain a clean energy superpower, giving our country energy security and lowering bills for families. Labour is clearly the change that Scotland needs. This continuity SNP government are just the same as ever, with no new ideas or ambitions. They promise big, but the rhetoric never lives up to reality. Scottish Labour know that continuity won't cut it. We are in a cost of living crisis and a climate emergency with stalled progress on both, and we need action now. In the midst of energy price crisis, the SNP somehow clawed back £133 million of underspend from the energy efficiency budgets of 2022 due to a lack of demand. This is just government incompetence, as 38% of Scottish households are living in fuel poverty. The national emergency of rising energy bills has again highlighted the urgent importance of insulating as many homes as possible. Upgrading the energy efficiency of homes would reduce energy demand, thereby cutting fuel bills for families. Labour's renewed energy plans will benefit Scotland, cutting energy bills for Scottish families and delivering the jobs and investment to Scottish communities that for far too long have been let down by the SNP and Conservatives. Scottish Labour knows that the only way to break out of 13 years of rising energy bills and energy insecurity under the Conservatives and SNP is to decisively move to clean, cheap, homegrown power. Only Labour has a genuine plan to lower people's bills. Labour is the change that Scotland needs. I move this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Do we have someone to second this motion? From the floor, thank you. Excellent, excellent. Motion 2 on home heating. Oh, do you know that? Okay, right.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Conference. Kevin Buchanan, GMB, moving motion 2 on home heating. Energy and the cost of living crisis is a topic which we return to at each conference as the crisis becomes ever more challenging, especially for the most vulnerable in society. The current levels of fuel poverty in Scotland and throughout the UK has exacerbated the crisis already faced by many low-income households in Scotland. The announced proposals for refining operations in Grangemouth would, apart from the economic consequences for Scotland, further undermined our energy independence and security and must be challenged and roundly condemned. Energy giants continue to pile profits high while people freeze in their homes. The Scottish Government continues to sell off our energy assets on the cheap and offshore manufacturing jobs. Billions of pounds of work and tax revenues are already being offshored. In reality, just transition has become an empty phrase used to hollow out our energy sector, another part of a failed political agenda which has left workers by the wayside. Scottish Government's £500 million over 5 years to anchor wind supply chains in Scotland is long overdue, but it needs to invest at pace to make up for the lost time to build up renewable manufacturing capacity in the supply chain. The Scottish Government's proposals to ban gas boilers in new builds and heat homes with retrofitted heat pumps and heat networks is unrealistic and will be detrimental to people's ability to heat their homes. It will undermine household and national energy security and affordability during a cost of living crisis. The cost of installation alone makes these proposals unrealistic and will result in costs being passed on to households. Installing an average heat pump will cost at least £10,500 after VAT. That is a cost that households, especially low-income households, cannot be expected to pay even in part. The Scottish Government's Home Energy Scotland grant and loan scheme means that grants can only be given up to the value of £7,500. The rest of the cost of the basic unit will have to be loaned, which means even more deductions from incomes and increased household debt. The Scottish Government has stated that £33 billion will be required for Scottish buildings to meet net zero targets. Expectations that the private sector will foot the bill will mean that these costs will again be passed on to household bills. The decision to ban all new build homes from installing gas boilers will mean that the housing crisis will deepen and first-time buyers will find it even more difficult to purchase their first home, as the higher cost of installing heat pumps will be added to the price of the home. Heat pumps and heat networks will still require the use of electricity, which is more expensive than gas. This will be yet another cost passed on to households. People may not only face higher costs for their energy, they may face limited or no energy at all, given that heat pump technology in Scotland has proved to be problematic. The Scottish Government has so far been unable to explain how energy will be met by electricity alone. Sole dependence on electricity by default will undermine energy security and limit Scotland's ability to keep homes warm. The UK's 280,000-kilometre existing gas grid supports more than 24 million homes. Given that Scotland already enjoys the existing gas infrastructure, to scrap this would mean unnecessary additional costs into the billions when there are lower carbon options available which can be provided through this network. Biogas, synthetic natural gas and hydrogen represent a sustainable future for the gas workforce and the transmission network. The blending of green gases offers a sustainable option that would minimise disruption for households and make best use of the existing gas workforce and network. Both products can be safely blended into natural gas supply without any change to existing appliances. It is reckless to invest hundreds of millions in problematic and costly heating systems to replace gas boilers when we possess a reliable gas network and have other low-carbon energy sources available. The existing workforce of skilled gas engineers could adapt the existing systems. Instead of needlessly investing billions into replacing an existing gas network, which is more affordable, the Scottish Government should instead increase its investment in developing new hydrogen technologies and provision through an existing gas network. The Scottish Government can't just ban its way towards its aim and force responsibility onto homes in a cost of living crisis. There has to be a full industrial strategy with trade unions front and centre. Conference I move.
Thank you, Kevin. So that motion is moved from the floor. So I can now invite motion 3, Scotland. Oh, sorry, you're second. Sorry, second it. Sorry, my notes are wrong here. Sorry. You're very welcome.
Oh, thanks. Conference, Cliff Bowen, Unite the Union, second in an excellent motion, motion 2. For Scotland's industrial strategy and energy security, I cannot stress enough that we are at an extremely important juncture. I would suggest to you, Conference, we're in the fight of our lives in my sector. Scotland has a choice. We either remain energy self-sufficient or we hand over the keys to foreign governments and multinationals. That is the choice that we are now faced with. We cannot export jobs and import carbon into this country. There is no bigger test on the table right now on what direction the country will choose than the future of the oil refinery at Grangemouth. And let's make no mistake, Conference, this will be a major test for an incoming Labour government at Westminster. Unite believes the proposal by Petro-Eneos to begin transitioning its Grangemouth refining operations has brought into stark reality the consequences of empty slogans. And there are plenty about, trust me. We believe the refinery does have a future, and a positive future, but this will require government support. And as we know, the UK and Scottish governments would claim that they have repeatedly stepped in to support workplaces and businesses of strategic national importance. There is no greater example of a work complex of national importance to the Scottish economy than the Grangemouth refinery, and indeed the whole site. The oil refinery is responsible for 4% of Scotland's GDP and approximately 8% of its manufacturing base. Unite's priority remains to fight for every job at the oil refinery, which employs around 500 direct workers, 2,000 directly across the Grangemouth complex and up to 20,000 in the wider supply chain. However, we have got to be honest here, Conference. Politicians across the political spectrum, with a few notable exceptions, just haven't got the national importance and significance of this situation. We had to shame the Scottish Government into widening the membership of the Grangemouth Future Industry Board because it was not fit for purpose. Indeed, it hadn't even met for a number of years. So while the forum's membership has been changed to include Unite along with the UK and Scottish governments, it can't remain a talking shop or a tick-the-box exercise to make it appear that the government has actually done something. We need clear ideas and concrete proposals being brought forward by the forum to secure the future of the site and for the workers there. Anything less would be the most serious case of political desertion and a betrayal of the workforce and of the wider Grangemouth community. Oil and gas workers understand the need to decarbonise. This hasn't snuck up on our sector. We get it. Unite fully supports workers gradually moving into renewables and decarbonised jobs. But tell us where these tens of thousands of green jobs have been created. And you've heard some of that this morning already, Conference. Where are they? How do we apply? What qualifications do we need? No one can tell you. Only 6,400 jobs in the Scottish onshore and offshore wind sector were estimated to have been created by 2021. The SNP-led government in 2010 promised 28,000 direct jobs in the offshore wind industry alone by 2020. And as you heard my colleagues saying earlier on, we had promises of becoming the Saudi Arabia of renewables. I'm not even sure what that means, Conference. So the actual job count, including both onshore and offshore workers, represents less than 7%, Conference, of the 94,000 jobs dependent on the oil and gas industry in Scotland. And these are numbers, by the way, that just roll off people's tongues. But these are working class people and communities that rely on these workplaces. We want Scottish Labour to ensure that a just transition is worker-led, because it's the expertise, skills and knowledge of the workers which can help deliver the decarbonisation of the oil and gas industry we all aspire to. The process itself could help protect the hundreds of jobs at Grangemouth and create tens of thousands of jobs through carbon capture, storage, hydrogen and offshore electrification. Oil and gas workers need concrete and fully costed plans. They need cast iron guarantees that they will not be thrown off a platform in the transition to net zero. Unite's fear is that's what's in the pipeline unless a coherent national energy strategy is put in place, and very soon. Support the motion, Conference.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for all you're doing to protect those jobs. Motion 3 on Scotland.
Right, I'll try and be quick, I promise. Good morning, Conference. My name is Ben Williams, Councillor for Fochabers Lambride and Communications Officer for Murray CLP. A just transition, despite its hollowed-out meaning now, is obviously of vital importance to us all, but especially in the North East and in Murray, owing to the employment of so many residents. One integral area of which, I'm sure we'd all agree, is wind farms, producers of clean, renewable energy. Over the past few years, bids have been invited on the development of new wind farms off the coast of Scotland, in what I've seen as described as the single largest privatisation of offshore energy yet seen. Quite the contrast from what we heard earlier about GB Energy. Not only this, but it has been reported that a £100,000 per square kilometre ceiling was placed on bids. You don't need me to tell you how off the mark this valuation is, and the fact that it has cost Scotland billions. Had the Scottish auction even resembled others in the rest of the UK, it might have raised tens of billions of pounds. In a similar vein to the reported price ceiling, the maximum financial penalty for leaseholders who fail to deliver local supply chain commitments is only £250,000. Yep, £250,000 for failing to deliver on a commitment worth billions. Conference, not only is this potentially harmful for our economy and our communities, but a failure to secure binding supply chain commitments equates to a failure to guarantee a just transition for those currently employed in the oil and gas industry in Scotland. Evidently, lessons must be learnt from our mistakes. A full public inquiry is needed alongside options for prospective remedies to the issues that I and this motion have pointed out. I'm going to finish with a quote from my colleague, Councillor Sandy Keith, which sums up the situation rather well. It seems as if the odds have been stacked in favour of big business and not the people of the North East. And with that, I move this motion.
Thank you, sir. Do we have someone to second, or is it moved from the floor? Moved from the floor. Thank you. So thank you to delegates for moving and seconding those motions. Can I now ask for delegates who wish to speak in this debate session to raise their hands, and I will take speakers in groups of 3. They've gone now, okay. Well, you've got people lined up already.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Kerr, Cunningham North, CLP delegate. First conference and first time speaking. Thank you. Comrades, I'm up here to support all of the motions, and I just want to focus primarily on Composite Motion 1 and focus on the improvement of public transport. If you want to see how inept and unreliable the SNP government is, you just need to look towards my ward of Ardrossan in North Ayrshire. There you'll find a harbour, still awaiting vital upgrades, nearly a decade after the then Transport Minister, Hamza Yousaf, promised it. You'll find a community bearing the brunt of all this betrayal, some of the poorest communities in our nation, left dangling in the wind by empty words, false promises and more false starts than Kate Forbes' next leadership bid. You'll find businesses who have decades of history in the community worrying about both their own and their employees' livelihood, to the point where they're contemplating closure because of the unreliability of Transport Scotland, Peel Ports, CalMac and the Scottish Government. And all this talk can be followed back to its source, which is the SNP. Ferries delayed, over budget and not fit for the harbour they're supposed to sail from. A harbour master in Peel Ports who care only about their bottom line, thanks to the privatisations of the Tories. An omni-shambles of historic standards. The Scottish Government must bring Peel Ports back into public hands, make sure the upgrades to the Ardrossan Harbour and Port, as well as the ferries, are started sooner rather than later, and those ministers who have failed our communities must be held to account. Scottish Labour has always backed Ardrossan as a port of choice for the Arran Ferry, as a position I know we all wholeheartedly agree with and support, now more than ever. For the sake of Ardrossan, Arran and North Ayrshire, this mess needs to be sorted out once and for all. Thank you, Conscience.
Well, I'm John Grady from Glasgow Kelvin CLP, and I'm also the prospective parliamentary candidate for Glasgow East. The speeches this morning have been excellent. They show that tackling climate change and delivering a truly just transition are at the core of our party's values. Each of us in this room and in our party and our movement is determined that no worker or family is left behind in the transition to net zero. We need a Labour government to do this. Our Green Prosperity Plan demonstrates that Scottish Labour is determined to deliver for Scotland huge investment in our port infrastructure, absolutely essential for future jobs in floating offshore wind, 50,000 clean power jobs, and strengthening supply chains in Scotland so that jobs stay here and are not offshored. Focusing on Grangemouth, the heartbeat of Scotland's industrial heartlands, and supporting industries such as CCUS. Now, the Tories' reckless approach to net zero is no surprise from a party that has been captured by extremists. The result, rocketing energy bills for families in our communities unable to afford heat and food, a moral outrage, and a loss of good unionised jobs, because under the Tories we have missed chance after chance to build strong domestic supply chains for the future. And as to the SNP, they're no better. As the Committee on Climate Change has pointed out, the Scottish Government lacks a clear delivery plan and has not offered a coherent explanation for how its policies will achieve Scotland's bold emissions reductions target. To put it another way, in plainer English, they've no idea what they're doing and why. We at Scottish Labour know what a huge opportunity net zero is, and we will deliver, just as we did last time. When our last Labour government came to power, we did not have a serious renewables industry. We changed that. From 2000 to 2010, the amount of electricity generated by offshore wind increased sevenfold. And we went from generating absolutely no offshore wind to 3.1 terawatt hours in 2010. That's quite a lot. At the heart of this great success was a Scottish Labour MP representing Ayrshire, Brian Wilson. Brian was an excellent energy minister and put in place the foundations for this great Labour success. Brian understood how important this was for skills, for good jobs, and to give Scotland a thriving industry of the future. And this, comrades, is a brilliant example of a Scottish Labour MP in government, in Westminster, taking decisions for the benefits of Scotland, that deliver for Scotland. And it is a perfect example of how wrong Humza Yousaf is to say it does not matter if Scotland elects Labour MPs. It does matter. Electing Scottish Labour MPs matters. At the next election, our nation faces a choice. More arid opposition from the SNP or Scottish Labour MPs in government implementing a just transition, creating high-quality jobs, fighting climate change and ensuring that we do not rely on tyrants for our energy. That is the choice, and I know that we are united to elect and help elect our great Scottish Labour candidates. Thank you, Conference, for your time.
Nothing there. Torquil Crichton, Western Isles CLP, and candidate for Nehallan Year constituency. Chair and signer, with your indulgence for a second. Mi tiwch son of can't think well, you was a college of your show, you're in Glasgow, Ballamore and Gale, Quantarurish and Jespet show, Quantarurtisch nimmert na tuin is son vi tokal gu son hilanier agus stiochach realtas labra. I won't translate all of that, Chair, but in short, if you're looking in, Mr. Sunak, bring it on. Thank you for allowing me to speak in this debate. Although we're on the western edge, we're going to be right in the middle of this transition to renewable energy. We're going to be in the North Sea for a long time, we know that, but it's a finite resource. We have to stop the planet heating up, and we have the tech to deliver carbon neutral energy. And if you take a map of Scotland, if you fold it on the north-south axis, all that investment, energy and expertise in the North Sea is going to come across onto the Atlantic seaboard in the next couple of decades. In the Western Isles, we're going to have 2 large onshore wind farms in Lewis and a smaller one, 50 megawatts to the north. The ScotWind round means that we've got a large array of 60-plus turbines to the west and another one to the north. Oil rigs were over the horizon. These developments are going to be very visible to people on the islands, and the transmission to the rest of the world to switch on the light bulbs in Birmingham and Burnham means that this transition is going to pass through some of the most scenic parts of the country. The practicalities of this are going to be enormous. The row of dominoes that have to fall from the viability of wind farms themselves, of floating wind farms, through cabling, transmission, interconnector, environmental concerns, planning concerns, banking concerns is massive. It's like a long row of dominoes that all have to line up and get it right. It's going to take the entire heft of the private sector, the entire heft of the UK and the Scottish Government, and crucially, it's going to need the consent of communities. And to get the consent of communities, we have to involve communities. There's 3 C's these communities, our communities, are looking for. The first is community benefit. Not one turbine blade is going to turn without massive investment from the UK government. That ought not to be free money. That investment ought to be in the form of community shares and a direct return for the public authorities and the communities most affected by these developments. Of course, we want consumer benefit. GB Energy promises lower bills all round. But I come from the Western Isles, which is some of the highest fuel poverty figures in the UK. The case for an island tariff, a lower island tariff, explains itself. And the third thing we want, which is very important, is community involvement. Community wind farms in the Western Isles and elsewhere provide a massive bounty in proportion to the private wind farms that already exist and what is promised from future private developments. We want to make sure that in this transmission grid that we are funding and that we are building across the whole UK, and on that interconnector, there has to be reserved space for community-owned wind farms to provide that bounty back to their own districts and to provide power to the grid. As I said, it's going to take everyone. It's going to take all of us, involve all of us, to do this transition. It's our national mission in the midst of a global crisis. Now, the best way to involve us all is to give us all a share, to involve communities from step one. If that isn't built in to the plans from the very beginning, then this transition is going to be like pulling teeth, like going to the dentist every year for 25 years as each community objects and feels alienated and uninvolved. People don't mind seeing power going past their houses, but they do object to profit going past their houses when they don't have a share in it. And we have to make sure that everyone has a share in this. By involving us all, that's the best way to do it, and that's the way we'll bring power to the people. Thank you, Conference.
So remember to make yourself known to the steward if you want to speak in this debate.
Yeah. Billy Stewart, Unison Scotland, supporting motion 1. British Gas have just announced profits for 2023 of £750 million profit, tenfold increase, a huge jump in profits without doing anything new, anything different or anything better. We lived in a rigged economy, a rigged system that makes us all colder, poorer, while billionaires are sending rockets to the moon. But it's time to clip the wings of the vultures at British Gas. We need to create a warm home plan and an energy system that puts people before obscene profits, that puts the most vulnerable in our society before insatiable shareholder greed. We urgently need to campaign to change this nauseating narrative and move towards publicly owned energy, a hugely popular demand, by the way. The public sector is the vehicle, clearly, to deliver affordable clean energy and a just transition that would leave us a lasting legacy for future generations. Comrades, we need to reverse the market-worshipping trend of the Tories and replace them with a plan, and we've heard the plan. We need to challenge an SNP government that grasps defeat from the jaws of victory, with ScotWind leaking millions out of Scotland and into the pockets of private and foreign investors. We need a change of government with a proper energy plan, a Labour government that changes the narrative. This is my 40th year in the Labour Party. I know what you're thinking, he's not old enough. You know what I mean? But let's hope I'm celebrating with you a Labour victory in 2024.
So can I get a show of hands for anybody else who wants to speak in this debate? So can you want to come up, please? Anyone else? All right.
Well, still good morning, conference. I'm Lynn Thompson. I'm from Aberdeen South and North Kincardine CLP, and I'm also the candidate for Aberdeen North at the next general election. Thank you. Thank you. And funnily enough, I'm also a first-time speaker at conference. I'm not quite sure how that happens. But I'd like to speak in support of composite motions 1 and 2. As you'd expect, it'd be rather remiss of me, hoping to represent Aberdeen at Westminster, not to come up and talk about the just transition. As we've heard, around about 100,000 jobs in Aberdeen, the North East, and across Scotland, and even the north of England, rely on the oil and gas industry. But there are three main truths that cannot be denied. And number one is, fossil fuels are finite. They will run out. Now, being a child of the 70s, I remember being told this then. Well, we're now in the 2020s, are we? And we're still trying to come to grips with this finite resource that will run out, that we've become ever more reliant on. The second truth is that climate change is real. Now, some people may have some trouble actually accepting that, but we are in the midst of a climate emergency. We have to change. We are leaving the time of global warming, and as the UN recently said, we are entering a time of global boiling. And thirdly, another truth, and you'd expect me to say this as the candidate for Aberdeen North, Aberdeen is very reliant on oil and gas at the moment, and that has to change. We have to make that transition to clean, renewable sources of energy. There's a lot of talk about resources, but let's appreciate the most important resource of all, the workers who will drive that transition and make it happen. Over 90% of the skills in oil and gas are directly transferable to renewables. But there seems to be some difficulty in some cases with passporting those skills across to the renewable industry. We have to make that easier. We have to have public ownership of energy as well. It's far too important a resource to leave to purely private, profitable means. I didn't think in my lifetime we would have warm spaces for people who couldn't afford to heat their homes, who have had to make that terrible decision between heating and eating. It pains me that people have to live like that in this, the 21st century. So I would ask conference to support composite motions 1 and 2. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Conference. My name is Brian Leishman, Perth and Kinross CLP, and I am the PPC for the new constituency of Alloa and Grangemouth. This is also my first time standing as a candidate in a general election, and this is also my first time speaking at Conference. Thanks very much to Lynn for stealing my line. But that is where the first stop, because what I am going to speak about is a tale we are all too familiar with, that of working people and entire communities being abandoned. Many people in the constituency I want to serve are yet to recover from the social and economic vandalism they suffered from in the 1980s, at the hands of a Tory government that closed mines, attacked trade unions, and whose passion for a deregulated, free market economy created gross inequalities. And now, Grangemouth, again, is under threat of industry and prosperity leaving the area. Workers at the refinery have been told that there would be up to 400 jobs lost as the refinery transitions to an oil terminal. But if we include workers in the wider supply chain, then we are looking at thousands of job losses and economic devastation for local businesses in Grangemouth. The utter contempt that the SNP have shown for workers, the Grangemouth community and all of Scotland with their disinterest and lethargy in engaging with PetroEneos is both telling and shameful. The SNP have offered no plan. No alternative uses for the site have been put forward to PetroEneos, just the total abdication of responsibility. Conference, throughout our history, it has been the Labour Party that provides the hope and change that people need when they need it most. In response to the slums of the 1920s, John Wheatley and the first Labour government provided social housing at affordable rates and employment. Then, in the 1940s, as Britain was bankrupt after defeating extremism, the Labour Party showed the world that a universal healthcare system was possible. The great Nye Bevan was right. It's the most civilised step any country has ever taken. People desperately wanted an end to the depression of the interwar years and wartime austerity. And the next 6 years of Labour government were truly momentous. In Conference, the next Labour government must harness the reforming zeal of those times, because history is repeating. If ever somewhere needs a Labour MP and a Labour government that will stand up for its future, then it's Alloa and Grangemouth. Because if these jobs are lost and the refinery stops, then the impact on the people of Grangemouth, the whole of Scotland and all of the UK is enormous. People need a Labour government to work with trade unions and PetroEneos to stop the worst possible outcome from happening. Refining must continue and we must keep Grangemouth working. Thank you.
Colm McHale, Unite the Union, going to speak a little bit about Scotland Conference because it's something that we don't talk about enough. A scandal that empowered private capital at the expense of workers. A scandal that the Scottish Government let happen. And a scandal that rewarded the very companies who left workers freezing in their homes. We're talking about the energy companies who, as Billy pointed out earlier, have announced record profits once again this year. But this is an all too common occurrence with the Scottish Government. Scotland is no isolated example. Time and again, under the supposed just transition, private capital has been empowered by that Scottish Government. We see a £2 billion PFI deal for nature restoration signed by a Scottish Green Government minister that puts them in partnership with the banks. We see 2 green free ports which create playgrounds for private capital in Scotland. Comrades, the Scottish Government talk a lot about sovereignty. They talk a good game about sovereignty, but what does sovereignty mean when you are systematically handing economic power to big business, to capital and taking it away from workers, leaving workers out, because that is the Scottish Government's strategy, and we are seeing it time and time again. Scotland, as I say, is no isolated example. Their plan for the just transition is to put Scotland on the market. They see an opportunity, and they see a neoliberal one which leaves workers out. The task for us is to demonstrate a political alternative, to take the opportunity presented by the Just Transition to push power out to workers, to unions and their communities, to take the chance offered to democratise the economy rather than stripping power from the hands of workers, as the Scottish Government have done time and again under the guise of the transition. That is what Scotland was an attempt to do. It's what their nature restoration attempts have done, and they will continue to do it until we articulate a political alternative which rejects the free market politics inherent to their approach and instead proposes democratising the economy, as we have seen with attempts like GB Energy. So please support, talk more about Scotland, talk more about their systematic attempts to empower the people who are the enemies of our movement. Thank you very much, Conference.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more contributions to this debate? Okay. So I now call on Rona Grant, Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs and Land Reform and Islands, to close this debate.
Feskerma Conference. Scotland desperately needs change, but that's even more so the case in rural Scotland. We face depopulation. Just today, the SNP announced a plan on depopulation, something that we've been pushing them for years and years. And what does their plan include? A rehash of old policies, yet another task force, and plenty promises to engage, to explore, to develop, without a single point of action. Decision-making has become centralised. Services have been removed from local communities, and this sets off a chain reaction. Services are cut, and those that would have provided these services are forced to leave. Their families leave, their children leave the school, their partners leave their jobs in local businesses, and their economic power is lost to that local economy. For those who remain, it becomes even more difficult to make a living. And daily I speak to people battling to stay at home in rural Scotland. People that are proud of their community and passionate about contributing to it. What I hear from them is real concerns over the SNP Green government that doesn't listen, that doesn't understand, and that doesn't act. The infrastructure they need is neglected, under-resourced, or just simply missing. We look back and see what happened to people who lived in St Kilda. Sadly, some of those who live in rural Scotland and island communities face exactly the same predicament today. If they stay, can they continue to battle against the odds, or do they simply give up and leave? Their attachment to home is strong, but their need to survive is even stronger. Their leaving is a personal disaster for them, but it also has an impact on all of us. These rural areas are our country's lungs, our food source, and our beautiful holiday destinations. And if people are lost, so will their ability to manage their villages and glens be lost for all of us. To keep people, we need homes, we need jobs, and we need services. And if I can firstly look at homes, because these areas are beautiful, second homes and holiday homes are attractive. Every community needs some of these, but they have to be proportionate to the local community. There are communities in Scotland where well over 50% of the homes are not lived in year-round, where locals can't afford to buy because of inflated house prices, where locals are forced to leave, taking with them their knowledge and their expertise and their economic contribution. This can be tackled by building more affordable homes, boosting crofting grants, but within a generation, these homes disappear into the holiday home market. We need to build, but we also need to keep those homes for local people. No home that is bought or built with taxpayers' money should be lost to that local community. The SNP Green Government have promised 110,000 new homes, promising 10% in rural areas. And that's 11,000 rural homes, disproportionately less than a fair share. But what's worse is it includes homes in the commuter belt. There are no prizes for guessing where those homes will be built if it costs £500,000 to build a home on an island. Fuel poverty is at its highest in the rural areas and the island communities, which are off gas grid, and yet this SNP Green Government think the best course of action is to force people to install heat pumps into drafty old houses. They should be insulating these homes before changing the heating system. Good insulation would mean that there would be less need for fossil fuels in itself, even without a change of heating system. We need a fabric-first approach. Labour has a plan. We are committed to decarbonise the grid, cut bills, increase energy security and deliver jobs in a just transition. And that is the change Scotland needs. We need to change from the government who has squandered the opportunities that ScotWind provided, putting in place an arbitrary maximum for bids on ScotWind leases. The UK Crown Estate ran a similar auction in 2022 with annual fees rather than a block sum and without the cap. If Scotland had followed a similar model, ScotWind would have raised £28 billion over the next decade. Conference, we need to encourage communities to generate electricity. Take, for example, Point and Sandwick Development Trust in the Western Isles. They have built wind farms and the community's returns were 34 times the standard community benefit payment. That's £170,000 per megawatt per annum compared to a mere £5,000. In Westray, a community wind project is expected to deliver £6.8 billion to the community over its 25-year lifespan. These projects bring economic growth and jobs. Our traditional industries do that too. Crofting, farming, and fishing underpin many of our communities. They have their role to play in our fight against climate change and to deliver for nature restoration. Yet these industries have been let down. Agriculture funding plundered to fill budget gaps, while the plan to impose HPMAs has led to a breakdown of trust in our coastal communities. Conference, Scottish Labour will win back that trust. These communities are the managers of our land and seas, and we will work with them. We must use their knowledge and expertise to manage and protect our natural environment. These traditional industries feed us, and now more than ever, with a growth in food poverty, we need them. Conference, I intend to bring forward a right to food bill to fight food poverty for once and for all. I can't speak about our islands without speaking about ferries. The issues are a daily occurrence. Our island communities have been badly let down. We need a ferry building programme that plans the rebuilding of the whole fleet continuously. This would be a 25-year plan, cutting the number of designs to make sure that ferries are interchangeable and keeping standby vessels to be deployed to cover breakdowns, maintenance and one-off. That is the change our islands need. This SNP government promised the earth and deliver absolutely nothing. The A9 was to be dualled by next year, yet we only have 11 miles of new dual carriageway to show for it. Conference, we need to empower our communities. We are the party of land reform, a policy that has been neglected for a decade. We are given to believe that the SNP Green Land Reform Bill is just a timid tick box exercise that will change absolutely nothing. The change Scotland needs is transformative land reform, and that empowers our communities. We have seen community ownership. We've seen what it does with renewable energy, cleaning up energy supplies, and raising funds to invest locally. We also know that depopulation has been halted and reversed in communities that own their own estates. Scottish Labour will not be timid. We will address patterns of land ownership that fail our communities. That is the change Scotland needs. And Conference, Scottish Labour will deliver it.
Thank you, Rona, for that and for all you do for our party. So, Conference, before we finish this session, we have to vote on the motions which have been presented, and this will be taken, I hope, just by a show of hands. So we'll start with Composite 1 on just transitions. Could those who are supportive of this raise their hands? And if you're against? Okay, so that's carried. Well done. Composite Motion 1, Labour's Clean Energy Mission. Those in support could please raise their hands. And against? Carried. Excellent. Those in favour of Motion 1 on energy prices, raise your hands. And those against? Okay, fairly uncontroversial so far. Motion 2 on home heating. Those in favour, raise their hands. And those against? Oh, we've got one against there. Sorry, sir. Sorry. I think that one's carried. Those in favour of Motion 3 on ScotWind, raise your hands. And those against? Okay, that one's carried. So that concludes that debate. Just a quick housekeeping note. So the conference is about to adjourn for lunch, and I remind you that a number of fringe events are taking place, and you can see your conference guide for details of them. I hope all members will support these fringes, which will help make the conference possible, and stewards are on hand should you need any help. If you're going to the SPT event, please leave some sandwiches for me. And can I also ask that you take all your belongings with you and return to your seats sharply after lunch. Conference will resume promptly at 2 p.m. for the leader's speech. So we ask delegates to begin queuing outside at 1:30, and so hopefully you'll be in your seats by 1:45. If the room's full, there will be that overspill room. Speak to stewards if you have any questions. Have a great lunch. Thank you.